And welcome everyone to the Shadows of Lambeau Field here on day 2 of the NFL Draft. I'm Wes Hodkiewicz, joined alongside Packers beat reporter Rob Demovsky and my boss Mike Vandermause. But guys, I don't know if anyone really cares now about the second or third round pick. The deal is done. The Packers tweeted about 10 minutes ago. Aaron Rodgers signed an extension, which the details aren't out yet. It's believed it'll make him the highest paid quarterback in the league, highest paid player in NFL history. Rob, I mean, did this surprise you? I know we all were, envisioning that this was going to happen here. Did you expect it to be today?
I didn't know when to expect it, Wes, but I respectfully disagree with the fact that it overshadows the draft picks because Rodgers was going to get done. I mean, that was a foregone conclusion. To me, it's still more interesting who they pick. I mean, obviously, Rodgers' contract is very important, but we all knew this was going to happen. It's not like there was this danger that, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to sign, or Aaron Rodgers is going to hold out, or Aaron Rodgers in 2 years is going to be a free agent. That's an important story. It's an important piece of information. But it was going to get done. The fact that it got done today, these things happen. When the negotiations are done, you announce a deal, and you don't hold off just because they signed or they're having the second and third round of the draft tonight.
Mike, that contract was expected to be somewhere in the $22 to $25 million a year range, chump change to guys like you and me. But for Rodgers going into this thing, I mean, with him getting that kind of contract, I have to ask the question. I know it's probably redundant, but is he worth that contract to be paid the highest paid player in NFL history?
He's worth every penny, in my opinion. I mean, he's the best quarterback in the NFL, bar none. You can have your Tom Brady's, you can have your Peyton Manning's. I think Rodgers, based on his age, based on his, however many years he's going to have left, he's probably going to be around for another 10 years. They have to pay him the market price, and that commands the most expensive contract in NFL history, and he's worth it. I mean, he gives the Packers a legitimate chance to be Super Bowl contenders for years to come. I mean, you don't get that many difference makers in this league. He's a difference maker. Show him the money.
Rob, I know a couple weeks ago we looked at this with Clay Matthews and his deal, which was it was heavy on the backside of it, kind of light for the first year. It would be, and I guess I would expect with $15 million in cap room that this probably will be pretty heavy this year as far as Rodgers' contract is concerned. What are you expecting to see with this contract, and is it going to be something that's going to kind of handicap the Packers now?
No, I mean, they planned for this, and I mean, look, when you have a good quarterback or whoever your best player is, they're going to take, 1/8 or 1/7 or 1/6 of the salary cap. That's just the way it is. They are going to need somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 million to sign their draft picks and their rookies. But you think, okay, Rodgers was already making $9.25 this year. So in order to get him to $20 million or 22, whatever the average would be or whatever it would count for this year, it's not like you need all $20 million. You only need the difference between that and $9.25 million. So I'm sure it's going to be heavy, the first couple of years. But they have smart people that's their job to figure this out and make it work and not handicap the franchise. So for people to sit here and say, well, this is now they can't sign people, that's not the way it works.
There were some questions, about what they were going to do with the 2 remaining years left on his deal, though, if they were going to pay him the $25 million or try to find somewhere in between. What are you expecting with that? Do you think they ended up siding on that side of it?
My guess is there'll be a decent chunk of change added to this year and next year. Because, like I said, they had if they doubled his salary, it'd still only be $9 million in new money this year. So my guess is it'll be quite a bit more than that. But how it's structured and we don't even know how many years it is yet. I mean, I literally got the phone call driving over here to do this show, so I haven't been able to call anybody or check in with any sources on what it might be.
Absolutely, that's just how we planned it too. Right in the drop of a hat there. Mike, last question with Rodgers. This does put him in a category now. You had Brett Favre and his contract. I believe it was 10 years, $100 million, which was pretty unprecedented at the time. Where do you kind of envision this kind of putting him now, in Packers lore? And I mean, looking at 2 guys back to back now that look like they're going to be here, for at least the majority of their careers.
Well, I mean, this is the 49ers, and, they had Joe Montana and Steve Young back-to-back. I think Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers back-to-back are going to wind up being the greatest, 1-2 combination. I mean, Packers fans are really going to be spoiled because it's going to be about a 25-year span, almost 3 decades of just top-flight quarterback. I mean, you just don't get that in the NFL very often. I mean, that is so rare. So, this is really special. I think people really should sit back and soak it in, savor it. Now, I have to agree with Rob when he talks about, some people worry about him, using up too much of the cap. I mean, what's the alternative? That they bring in a mediocre quarterback so that they can afford to pay everybody else.
Well, Geno Smith's still available, so.
Exactly. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. You've got a top-flight guy, you pay him, and then you work around the rest of the, salaries. I mean, that's what Russ Ball is paid to do, Ted Thompson is paid to do, and they can do that. So for anybody to even express a concern about that, I mean, I ask the question, what is the alternative? You aren't going to send Aaron Rodgers packing.
Right. Once again, if you're just joining us on PackersNews.com and GreenBayPressGazette.com, Aaron Rodgers contract interrupting our live draft pre-show today. Those details still yet to be determined. He'll be talking at 4:30, so be sure to check into PackersNews.com. We'll have all the blogs and tweets and all that fun stuff. But Rob, getting back to what you said is the more important matter at hand right here. The Packers addressed the defensive line yesterday. They went and got Dayton Jones. Now they have a pick, I think, at 55 in the second round and a third rounder if they stand pat. What are the biggest needs you think they need to address now in day 2 after bringing in Jones for that defensive line?
Well, I don't know that they've changed necessarily. Obviously, the one up front pass rusher, multi-dimensional player, they filled one spot, but I mean they still have issues at safety, still have issues on the offensive line. They're still the elephant in the room is sort of the running back situation. Do they address it or do they? I mean, they may take Monte Ball at 55 today. They also may not take one today. They may not take one tomorrow, and they may think DeJuan Harris, Alex Green, James Starks, and maybe Cedric Benson, if they end up re-signing him, are good enough. I mean, it's a great unknown in terms of what they think they're going to do with their running back situation. So neither would surprise me. I mean, it would not surprise me if the guy they like is Monte Ball and they took him at 55, or maybe even had to move up to get him. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they don't draft a running back at all this weekend.
Absolutely. And as Justin Hall, our friend from the Fox Valley region, just texted me so much for not extending Rodgers during the draft. He had a conversation with me yesterday about that. Well, why would they do it now? You have all this stuff going on, but they did it. And Mike, here we are now looking at the draft side of things. This has been a draft that's really been heralded for its depth. And I know it's something I've talked a lot about, whether it's the safety group, running backs. How do you look at this draft? And obviously this is something that a lot of pundits have talked about with the amount of depth there. These are 2 important days for the Packers in building the rest of their foundation.
Well, they really are. And, there's a lot of value left here, especially in the second round. It wouldn't shock me if the Packers maybe tried to make a move up. I mean, if there's a guy they really like or covet, maybe it is an Eddie Lacy or a Monte Ball, and if they really want him, maybe they would trade up to get a running back. But as Rob says, I mean, you never know. Maybe they're happy with the guys they have. I mean, they won the Super Bowl with James Starks as their starting running back, so maybe Ted Thompson feels that would be good enough. But I have a sneaking suspicion if Ball or Lacy were around that the Packers certainly would have to take a long, hard look at those guys. They would add a dimension to the offense, I would think.
I know, and Pete Doherty talking to him yesterday, he's a big fan of Ball too. I think he's another guy that he picked Lacy, but he also talked about how if they don't pick a running back there, Ball could give him pretty much equal value, looking forward. Rob, to kind of put you on the spot here, you mentioned you don't think the Packers are actually, I shouldn't say don't think, but there's a chance they don't address the running back. Do you think they need to bring one into those groups, or were you impressed enough with what you saw with DeJuan Harris at the end of last year?
That's above my pay grade, Wes. I'm not a scout. I've never, ever pretended to be. I think reporters that do are making huge mistakes. DeJuan Harris did show a flash. The question is he big enough? Is he durable enough to do it over the long haul? Mike McCarthy said at the owners' meetings in March that he'd like to have a 1-2 punch, and I think one of those 2 punches is DeJuan Harris. The question is, do they need more of a featured guy as the other one, or can they get by with just one of these other guys? It's a decision that I'm certainly not qualified to make, and don't know what I would do if I were them.
Mike, looking at the rest of these next 2 days and into Sunday with undrafted free agency, Ted Thompson was asked yesterday, about DJ Smith and the reason they decided to part ways with him. And he said it just had to do with the fact that they were looking for more numbers to play with when it comes to undrafted free agency. Does that kind of speak to this whole thing? I mean, they aren't going to go out and try to find an unrestricted guy. They're already cutting some of their own guys to make room for potential guys they could bring in, after the draft is over.
Well, if I remember correctly, Thompson's response was it was a, quote, roster thing. Whatever a roster thing is, they are clearing space for undrafted guys. I'm still, I kind of shake my head. I'm a little befuddled by this decision. It's like, DJ Smith, 2 years ago, they draft him. He gets hurt. He was their starter last September, for crying out loud. And now he's out on the street. Well, not anymore. San Diego.
He was for 24 hours.
Why didn't they give him a chance to rehabilitate the knee? That's my question. I don't understand it. I think they should have given him a shot to come back. So it's puzzling to me.
Is is an undrafted rookie really better than DJ Smith? Yeah. I mean, do they need an undrafted rookie more than they do a guy who was a decent player? He was a C minus type of player, so he's a serviceable guy. I'm not sure Brad Jones is any better than DJ Smith. He might be a little better, bigger guy, different body type, but it is, to me, it's a lame reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at it, they've signed 3 or 4 street free agents now, 3 of whom did not play in the league last year at all. One of them was not even playing completely. Lois Means was trying to get a workout with an arena team at the time. So it is kind of a curious move, but the Packers obviously decided to move forward from DJ Smith and getting a little bit larger. We'll have to wait and see. Rob, the other thing I want to ask you about was the offensive line. That was a question that's been brought up a lot the last few days. Wondering if Melnick Watson, that's a guy that Pete looked a lot into, if he could be a fit there. Do the Packers need to address that there, do you think, over these 3 days? Or what do you think about that group?
It depends on Derek Sherrod, really, I think, and we don't know. I'm not sure if they know what his health status is. He obviously missed all of last season with that broken leg. If he can play and they feel good about him, I mean, heck, don't forget this guy was a first-round pick 2 years ago. So if he can play, then maybe they don't, but only they know that, and maybe they don't even know that right now. But I still think Dietrich Smith is a viable option at center. I think they're solid at guard with Lang and Sitton. Barclay is a decent enough guy that I think he could develop whether they play him on the right side and move Bulaga to left. And I still don't think you can rule out Marshall Newhouse, although as a pure athlete and a strength guy, I mean, there was a reason he was a 5th-round pick, and most of those guys that start at left tackle are 1st or 2nd-round picks. So, I think a lot of this hinges on Sherrod.
Mike, the Packers, you look at this team right now, they're going to invest, over $100 million probably in their quarterback position. Do they need to find somebody there to protect Aaron Rodgers, whether it's today in this draft or sometime down the line?
Well, one thing we can be almost certain of is that Ted Thompson will draft an offensive lineman, at least one, maybe more, either today, tomorrow, because he has picked an offensive lineman every draft since he's been in Green Bay. So it's a given. That's basically, 5 of your 22 positions are made up of offensive linemen. You have to keep restocking that position. So, and you make a good point. I mean, you have to protect Aaron Rodgers. I happen to think, and I've been kind of pushing this for a while now, I think their best option is to move Brian Bulaga over to left tackle. I think your guy, Don Barkley, didn't you discover Don Barkley? You scout him? I think he could be solid at right tackle. Maybe he's the next Mark Tauscher, and he's entrenched there for the next 10 years. But I think Bulaga really has the potential to be a solid left tackle. Now, whether they're willing to move him after this injury that he had last year, who's to say? But I think that's their best option.
One other thing I want to ask you about, Rob, I was last night when the draft got over, I ran across Mike McCarthy. He was all smiles, going out to his car, going home and everything, looked really, really happy about how things turned out.
Are you stalking him in the parking lot again, Wes?
I was doing an interview. But the question I have is, I don't know how much you follow what happened in Dallas yesterday, but there's reports out of Dallas that Jason Garrett had his hands in his head after they drafted Travis Frederick. Is there something to be said for having that kind of, I don't know if you want to call it relationship, whatever it is, between Mike McCarthy and Ted Thompson over these last 8 drafts that has kind of helped him get to this point? Because it seems like in other places, it isn't always that fluid.
It's a good question. I mean, that's stuff that goes on behind closed doors. And, all indications are that Thompson and McCarthy have a really good working system as far as selecting players. And, when I first got here and Ron Wolf was the general manager and Mike Holmgren was the head coach, it was always there was always this feeling that, even though Wolf was in charge, that he would never give Holmgren a player that he didn't want. I would assume that, given that Ted worked under Wolf and, was tutored that way, that I would assume that it's the same working relationship now. McCarthy, I'm not sure he's as involved in personnel as maybe Holmgren was. We all know what ended up happening is he wanted to be a GM, which is basically the reason he left here. I'm not sure McCarthy has as much interest in it as some other head coaches do.
Mike, as we kind of get ready for this next round of drafts, I just want to look back at Dayton Jones. This was a guy that I had in my mock draft. I know Pete talked about him yesterday, all the strengths he has, adding to that defensive line, finding probably the tallest guy they have there that can kind of anchor and also pull inside in the sub packages. What are you expecting from him right now? It seems like from everything I've seen and everything I've heard, this is a guy that really can come in and has a makeup that could translate right away, as opposed to Jerrell Worthy, who was a little bit quiet last year.
I mean, maybe this is a simplistic analysis, but I think he could be the fill the void that Cullen Jenkins left 2 years ago. I mean, they lost him to unrestricted free agency, and I don't think they ever adequately replaced him. I think maybe Dayton Jones, not exactly the same guy. He's a little taller, maybe a little leaner, but he can put on some weight. But he can also play inside, outside. He could give you some pass rush. So I think maybe he's the missing piece there. They've missed Cullen Jenkins. Let's make no bones about it. And, you mentioned last night Mike McCarthy smiling. I thought it was because of Dayton Jones. Yeah. Now we probably learn he's smiling because Aaron Rodgers' contract got done. You could have had a scoop last night, Wes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was in the middle of an interview. I should have stopped and said something. Asked him to take my picture or something like that.
But you know what? Defensive line was an obvious need. Jones, I think, fills a huge void there. They've got a lot of question marks on that line, so that's definitely going to help their team in the near future and down the road.
You have to remember, going into next offseason, if assuming they don't get something done with Raji, they're going to have, I think, 5 of those guys are all going to be unrestricted free agents. So they had to find somebody there to build some depth. Rob, the reason I like Jones going into this thing is basically because you look at these last 3 drafts they've done. They took Mike Neal in the 2nd round. He looks okay at times, but he's been injured. They took Jerrell Worthy. He was pretty quiet before the injury. I felt like they need to go and actually get a first-rounder and spend that high of a pick rather than trying to test the waters again in day 2. Do you think there's something to be said for that they actually finally went out and found a guy that hopefully can be that next Cullen Jenkins?
Well, you look at, other than Raji, Wes, all the guys that they have on the line they're kind of specialty guys where, for example, C.J. Wilson's just a run guy. Pickett's really, even though he does play some nickel, really more of a run guy. Neal is a sub-package guy. Worthy, probably more of a sub-package guy. Mike Daniels, same thing. Now, here's a guy who, as Mike said, can play a number of different spots. And more importantly, like Cullen Jenkins, he's a 3-down player. And they do not have many defensive linemen who can stay on the field in base, nickel, dime, even their 1-down lineman packages.
Mike, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to just talk about quickly the NFC North. You look at the Vikings, they did not take Manti Te'o. They had 3 first-round picks, did not bite on Te'o, trade back up to get Cordarrelle Patterson. They get Xavier Rhodes, and then they had Floyd from Florida fall to them at 23. What did you think about their draft, and is that something that the Packers are going to have to match up to now? Because as it looks, there's questions about their quarterback, but there's a lot of things I like about Minnesota.
Well, there is, and it's not often a team can get 3 first-round draft picks. Now, they're going to pay the price because they don't have any picks today. They won't pick again until tomorrow, so the Packers can catch up a little bit. But, that's a team, obviously, they gave the Packers a run for their money in the NFC North. I think they're going to be a team to be reckoned with. You also, if you're the Packers, you have to be a little concerned with Detroit. They pick up another pass-rushing defensive lineman, to couple with Ndamukong Suh. That's going to be a rugged defense, I think, to face up to. So I think the NFC North has gotten better. You could argue the Bears. I'm not so sure about that pick. I think they reached a little bit for Long as a guard.
But that's a nice little pun there.
Yeah,
I don't know if you realize.
I don't think I did. So that would be probably the one pick in the division yesterday that I didn't quite understand. But other than that, I think the Vikings definitely improved themselves.
Well, you look at Kyle Long. He was a guy who originally went and tried to do professional baseball, ended up spending 2 years, I think, at the same junior college as Melnick Watson did. And now, he's a first-round draft pick. He started 4 games last year, at Oregon. So, looking at you, Rob, was that kind of a reach for them? I had him as going with Alec Ogletree.
Well, it's a surprise, Wes, but not if you think about who their head coach is and what they want to do offensively. And, we saw it in that stadium. Jay Cutler just got abused last year. And, Mark Trestman realizes that he's an offensive guy, and they got to protect Jay Cutler. When they've run into trouble, it's because Cutler is under pressure. So whether the player itself, yeah, that was a little surprise. The position, addressing offensive line, maybe not so much.
All right, Mike, you get the final question. Rob will be researching this tomorrow for tomorrow's Green Bay Press Gazette and PackersNews.com. What happens with Aaron Rodgers Contract-wise, do you have any thoughts on what this might end up looking like? Is it going to be closer to 25? What does your hunch tell you as far as what this is going to look like for Rodgers?
24.25 million average per year. That's my prediction. Write it down, Wes. And by the way, we didn't have an over/under. I'm a little disappointed.
Well, I had an over/under written. I didn't want to. I was going to go with how many picks do the Packers make today, and I put it at 2.5 to see if they might trade back for some. You guys can take it quick if you like.
I'll go under.
Okay. Would you like to say that, hey, they're going to go and trade for another pick today?
Nah, under. They're gonna stick where they're at, I think.
Well, that's your over/under. I was gonna build it off of it a little bit more, and then you have Aaron Rodgers, so it's like, well, you got to make some time for stuff. So, Rob, last question for you: the Packers in this draft, this is the way they do it. They don't go get unrestricted free agents. They build their team this way. Are the Packers going to get what they need out of this draft? Do you think to be a Super Bowl contender next year?
Wes, I think they need at least 3 or 4 impact guys. Looks like Jones will be one of them. I still think they need somebody that can make an impact in the secondary. They need somebody that can make an impact on offense, whether it's a back or a lineman or a tight end. I think they're on track, it would appear, to get 3 or 4 guys that can help them right away.
All right, Rob, we appreciate you being here. Mike, the same as you. Did it 2 days in a row. I appreciate it. Be sure to check out all their tweets, blogs, and everything throughout the night as it pertains to the draft. We're also going to be running to that big green and brick building behind us for the Aaron Rodgers news conference. We'll have tweets with that along with a follow as soon as that is over. But until next time, for Rob Demovsky, he's Mike Vandermause. I'm Wes Hodkiewicz. We'll see you later.